Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Thanks for checking out my video. So to continue with some more musical examples and how we can apply some of those scales we've looked at in previous videos, I'm going to go through some more simple Guitar Hero licks, this time in the style of Duane Allman, and most specifically with his slide style of playing. So Duane Allman is definitely a big influence on my playing, or definitely my slide playing at least. I had never really got into too much slide guitar until I heard Duane and the Allman Brothers Band, and then yeah, oh my god, blew my mind. I just had to learn it. During his short career, Duane really did make a huge impact in the world of blues. He further developed the bottleneck slide style of people like Elmore James. He blended the blues with country and southern rock elements, and even ventured further with more psychedelic and jazz-like experimental pieces in his playing in standard tuning. His playing was inventive, technically astounding, and always full of a lot of feeling. Allman was also a highly sought after session player and recorded with many major artists throughout the late 60s. Just to name a few, is Otis Rush, Wilson Pickett and Aretha Franklin, as well as many, many more. He also featured on Eric Clapton's album, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, which is generally considered to be Clapton's greatest work. Allman has an absolute killer blues guitar tone. It's powerful, it's fiery, and always has an awesome crunch, yet at the same time it's always very precise and very clear. Anyway, if you haven't listened to much of Duane, I would definitely recommend him. Listening and studying his playing will definitely give you some inspiration to learn slide, as well as more with his standard or playing in standard tuning. There's definitely a good selection of Duane Allman recordings out there thanks to his extensive session work. Obviously more would be better. If you're after a few recommendations, I would definitely say the first three Allman Brothers Band albums are a great place to start. The third album, I think Duane is only on half, but still all three will give you a real good feel for the band and his playing in both standard tuning and open E for slide. I would definitely check out the Derek and the Dominoes album as well, which is also really good, has a few classic blues numbers with slide as well. But the one I would say is top of the list is the Allman Brothers live at Fillmore East. And if you're going to check that one out, definitely listen to the deluxe edition, as I think it has around double the amount of tracks on it. In my opinion, this is simply the greatest live album ever recorded. A couple of B.B. Kings are very, very close. But yeah, this one hands down just tops the list. If you don't think that's right, then please feel free to get in touch with me. If you think another live album is much better, yeah, send me your suggestions. I'd be super happy to discuss this further. Anyway, this album is an absolute masterpiece in my opinion. It gives you the raw slide tones of Duane. It gives you a huge amount of blues standards done in the full, raw, dirty, edgy Allman way. And then it combines the smooth, rolling southern rock ballads with other psychedelic, dreamy songs. There's even a 22-minute version of Whipping Post on there, I think. Yeah, it's amazing. Just go out and get it. Changed my life. Probably will change yours as well. So anyway, how can we sound like Duane? Well, Duane actually used quite a lot of guitars over his short career, but the two he's probably most associated with are a 57 Gold Top Les Paul. I think he did actually play a 59 Cherry Burst Les Paul later in his career. But in the second, or I guess kind of the third, is the Gibson SG, which is the guitar he used for slide. Dickie Betts, who was the other guitarist in the Allman Brothers band, he actually gave Duane his SG simply because he said he was tired of waiting for Duane to always retune his Les Paul between songs and every time he played slide. So if we focus on the SG, as we are really talking about his slide playing, the first thing is he obviously uses an open tuning, specifically open E. This means by strumming across all of the strings unfretted, we get an E major chord. This is a common trait for a lot of slide players, and really makes lead playing with slide much more convenient, as more of the notes we want become available on a single fret. Now to look at the guitar, we can see that he's using a straight solid body guitar with humbuckers. Now these humbuckers would be vintage style, early PAF pickups. These are typically not very high output, and they generally produce a rich and obviously vintage tone. Now many slide players usually use heavier strings, but from what I've read, Duane actually didn't. Most commonly he would use 10 to 38, which is not actually that heavy at all, especially on the bottom. But depending on your setup, you may find heavier strings give you that thicker tone. I personally use 11s when I'm playing slide, but I'm using a Telecaster. And that brings me to my next point. So you can play slide on any guitar you want. And although Duane played with Gibsons, with humbuckers, I found that I can get fairly close using my Tele. But I will tell you, you really do have to work for it to get that sort of tone. And even when you think you might have something fairly close, 2 minutes later you'll probably find yourself adjusting things and messing around with it again. Something with humbuckers will just make your life a lot easier. Gibsons also usually have a much larger radius on the neck, which ultimately means a flatter fretboard, which I think would make slide playing easier as well. A modern Fender usually has 9.5. It's not too much difference, but a vintage Fender is usually at 7.25, I think. And I can't imagine that would be too great. However, this is all just personal preference. If you could do it, if it suits your style, then go for it. On Duane's finger, he used a glass slide, but not just any glass slide. Duane actually used a little medicine bottle, and while you probably won't be able to get one of these, there are obviously hundreds of glass slide options out there. Just make sure you stick to glass. Metal, brass or bone slides, imitation bone, I hope, are all available, but they will sound slightly different to glass. Glass usually has a much warmer and thicker tone, and that is obviously what you need if you want to sound like Duane. In terms of Duane's actual playing style, he is in fact very unique in what he's doing, and if you want to learn this sort of style, it will take you a little while to master. With his slide hand, he has his glass slide on one of his fingers, I think his third finger, and he's actually lying his other fingers softly over the strings behind the slide to stop them from ringing out too much. Then with his other hand, he's using his fingers to pluck each note, while muting the other strings with his thumb or his other fingers. As he moves to a different note, he mutes the one before, the note before, and this creates this sort of jolty, raw, sort of start-stop staccato effect that is synonymous with his sound. So what do we need in terms of other equipment? Well, again, we need a vintage style tube amp for starters. I think Duane was known for using either Fender amplifiers or big Marshall stacks. But both of these amps are obviously really, really different to each other. So it is sort of hard to pin down how he was using them. But I can tell you that either way, they would be turned up loud. in the late 60s, early 70s, large amps were frequently used at high volume in order for the sound to fill the venue. So a lot of Duane's tone would typically come from a really cranked amp. Now, when we crank a tube amp to a good level, usually we get a better response, almost like the amp is starting to open up. So yeah, unfortunately for us, we probably don't really get into this situation much anymore, especially if you're playing at home or in an apartment, and it shows generally nowadays we can mic everything up. But I mean, you could try it at a rehearsal or practice. Just make sure the rest of your band has earplugs, or maybe you turn the amp away from them, or put it in a cupboard. That's what I hear Eric Clapton used to do. If you're looking for an amp to do this, I would recommend getting something lower powered that you could crank, probably anywhere from around 15 to 30 watts. Pedals. Well, I'm not really sure Duane was too well known for using pedals. I have heard he used the fuzz face for his slide playing, and most specifically, apparently he used to put a die-in battery in it, which I imagine would give you a slightly weaker overdrive sort of sound. Personally, I think on a lot of his other material, Duane probably took a more purist approach, went straight into his amp, and then probably used his volume knob for dynamic changes between rhythm and lead playing. But, I mean, I could be wrong. As always, if you want, you could use a clean booster just to make your solo stand out a little in songs if you don't want to mess around with that volume knob. Or a vintage style overdrive pedal would be good as well. When I'm trying to get his sound on my telly, I'm usually using a combination of drives, a compressor, and maybe a booster as well. Yeah, so like I said, it's not that easy. The single coils can also make it a bit messy sometimes as well, but it just means you really have to probably work a little bit harder to be a bit more precise. So anyway, what is Duane doing musically? Well, a lot of the time, especially with slide playing on a lot of standards, he's really sticking to both the major and the minor blues, or the major minor pentatonic scales. But a lot of time really leaning more towards that minor sort of sound. However, as things get more experimental in the Allman's music, he definitely gets a lot more modal and jazz-like. But on the bulk of the blues standards anyway, it's almost all that minor blues sort of sound, or we'll just say major minor blues to avoid any arguments. Another tip with his playing style is everything needs to be super snaky. And what I mean by that is everything has a slide. No note is simply just played. Every single note is either slid into, slid out of, or both. Now, that may seem really obvious to some as he's playing slide, but that was just something that I had to figure out. Although there's also a lot of precision in what he's playing, there is also a lot of dirt and a lot of mess, should we say. So it's worth experimenting with playing certain notes perfectly and cutting loose with a raw style on others. Anyway, that's probably more than enough info. I've tried to put a few simple licks together here in this video with the tabs. Hopefully you can learn these and start putting them into your own playing, or just use them as a starting point to create your own. Yeah, cool. Alright, let's check them out.
Bye.